Hello, everybody. We're back for chapter 3 of Flatland. Again, Flatland is by Edwin A. Abbott, and it was written in 1884. So before we get into chapter 3, I just want to remind you that the purpose of this book is to be a bit of a commentary on Victorian society in the 1880s. And so it articulates a lot of class and gender roles that we don't subscribe to today, but it does so in an attempt to highlight their absurdity. And so it is almost satire in that it's trying to point out the problems with Victorian society, and that includes gender and class roles. And so I apologize for the sexism and the classism that is inherent in here, but again, it is making a point of those things being absurd. So just kind of that warning as we get into chapter 3 so that you know where it's coming from. Chapter 3, concerning the inhabitants of Flatland. The greatest length or breadth of a full-grown inhabitant of Flatland may be estimated at about 11 of your inches. 12 inches may be regarded as a maximum. Our women are straight lines. Our soldiers and lowest classes of workmen are triangles with two equal sides, each about 11 inches long, and a base or third side so short, often not exceeding half an inch, that they form at their vertices a very sharp and formidable angle. Indeed, when their bases are of the most degraded type, not more than the eighth part of an inch in size, they can hardly be distinguished from straight lines or women, so extremely pointed are their vertices. With us, as you see, these triangles are distinguished from others by being called isosceles, and by this name I shall refer to them in the following pages. Our middle class consists of equilateral or equal-sided triangles. Our professional men and gentlemen are squares, to which class I myself belong, and five-sided figures or pentagons. Next above these come the nobility, of whom there are several degrees, beginning at six-sided figures or hexagons, and from thence rising in the number of their sides till they receive the honorable title of polygonal or many-sided. Finally, when the number of the sides becomes so numerous, and the sides themselves so small that the figure cannot be distinguished from a circle, he is included in the circular or priestly order, and this is the highest class of all. It is a law of nature with us that a male child shall have one more side than his father, so that each generation shall rise, as a rule, one step in scale of development and nobility. Thus the son of a square is a pentagon, the son of a pentagon a hexagon, and so on. But this rule applies not always to the tradesmen, and still less often to the soldiers and to the workmen, who indeed can hardly be said to deserve the name of human figures, since they have not all their sides equal. With them, therefore, the law of nature does not hold, and the son of an isosceles, i.e. a triangle with two sides equal, remains isosceles still. Nevertheless, all hope is not shut out, even from the isosceles, that his posterity may ultimately rise above his degraded condition. For after a long series of military successes, or diligent and skillful labors, it is generally found that the more intelligent among the artisan and soldier classes manifest a slight increase of their third side or base, and a shrinkage of the other two sides. Intermarriages, arranged by the priests, between the sons and daughters of these more intellectual members of the lower classes, generally result in an offspring approximating still more to the type of the equal-sided triangle. Rarely, in proportion to the vast numbers of isosceles births, is a genuine and certifiable equal-sided triangle produced from isosceles parents. Such a birth requires, as its antecedents, not only a series of carefully arranged intermarriages, but also a long-continued exercise of frugality and self-control on the part of the would-be ancestors of the coming equilateral, and a patient, systematic, and continuous development of the isosceles intellect through many generations. The birth of a true equilateral triangle from isosceles parents is the subject of rejoicing in our country for many furlongs around. After a strict examination conducted by the Sanitary and Social Board, the infant, if certified as regular, is with solemn ceremonial admitted into the class of equilaterals. He is then immediately taken from his proud yet sorrowing parents and adopted by some childless equilateral, who is bound by oath never to permit the child henceforth to enter his former home, or so much as to look upon his relations again, for fear lest the freshly developed organism may, by force of unconscious imitation, fall back again into his hereditary level. The occasional emergence of an equilateral from the ranks of his serf-born ancestors is welcomed, not only by the poor serfs themselves, as a gleam of light and hope shed upon the monotonous squalor of their existence, but also by the aristocracy at large, for all the higher classes are well aware that these rare phenomena, while they do little or nothing to vulgarize their own privileges, serve as a most useful barrier against revolution from below. Had the acute-angled rabble been all, without exception, absolutely destitute of hope and of ambition, they might have found leaders in some of their many seditious outbreaks, so able as to render their superior numbers and strength too much even for the wisdom of the circles. But a wise ordinance of nature has decreed that, in proportion as the working classes increase in intelligence, knowledge, and all virtue, in that same proportion their acute angle, which makes them physically terrible, shall increase also, and approximate to the comparatively harmless angle of the equilateral triangle. Thus, in the most brutal and formidable of the soldier class, creatures almost on a level with women in their lack of intelligence, it is found that, as they wax in the mental ability necessary to employ their tremendous penetrating power to advantage, so do they wane in the power of penetration itself. How admirable is this law of compensation, and how perfect a proof of the natural fitness, and I may almost say the divine origin of the aristocratic constitution of the states of Flatland. By a judicious use of this law of nature, the polygons and circles are almost always able to stifle sedition in its very cradle, taking advantage of the irresponsible and boundless hopefulness of the human mind. Art also comes to the aid of law and order. It is generally found possible, by a little artificial compression or expansion on the part of the state physicians, to make some of the more intelligent leaders of a rebellion perfectly regular, and to admit them at once into the privileged classes, a much larger number, who are still below the standard, allured by the prospect of being ultimately ennobled, are induced to enter the state hospitals, where they are kept in honorable confinement for life. One or two alone of the more obstinate, foolish, and hopelessly irregular are led to execution. Then the wretched rabble of the isosceles, planless and leaderless, are either transfixed without resistance by the small body of their brethren, whom the chief circle keeps in pay for emergencies of this kind, or else more often, by means of jealousies and suspicions skilfully fomented against them by the circular party, they are stirred to mutual warfare, and perish by one another's angles. No less than 120 rebellions are recorded in our annals, besides minor outbreaks, and numbered at 235, and they have all ended thus. Again, this chapter is really a statement on the idea that ideas that have really started coming into the public knowledge in the last few years in the U.S. The idea of class warfare and the idea that pulling oneself up by its bootstraps is much more difficult than it sounds. And in this chapter, they talk a lot about how it's really difficult to rise above your class in Victorian England, that only nobles are able to increase their wealth and increase their assets, and that it's much more difficult for the lower classes in Victorian society to do so. And again, that mirrors a lot of what goes on in the United States at times. And so again, thank you for listening to Flatland Chapter 3. And I hope to talk to you more about this when we get back to school eventually. Thanks.